Thank you for joining us on our journey of 1,000 pages. I'm your host, Anty, with my co-host, Christina.
Hey there. Welcome to 2026.
Oh, yeah, it's 2026. Woo!
Doesn't feel real.
I mean, I have not had a problem with it yet. It is just another year.
I almost wrote 2012 on a check the other day.
Girl.
I know. It was really bad. It was real bad.
That's horrid.
But this month, January, we read a narrative nonfiction book that is a genre that tells true stories using the literary style and techniques of fiction. So they will introduce characters, have a character arc, plot, vivid scenes, trying to immerse you in a bit of, well, in this case, history.
Yeah. And this month we have read The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson, which tells the story of the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago from the perspectives of, hold on, what's the architect's name?
Daniel Burnham.
Daniel Burnham and H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer.
And we chose this book because, well, first of all, if you Googled narrative nonfiction, this is one of the top 10 books that shows up in every single list. And also, it's been on my personal TBR pile for about 10 years.
Has it been around for 10 years?
It came out in the early 2000s.
What? How have I never heard of this book? That's crazy.
It's not your genre, and you don't work in a library.
Correct. So, what were your thoughts? What do you think? What are we thinking? What does it say on the show notes? I can't read that from here.
I even wrote it in bold. We're talking about...
Yes. I get a start with my opinions about this book.
Yes.
Which are bad. So
Your opinions are bad or the book is bad?
The book is bad. Wait, hold on. Yes. I did not enjoy this book. I shouldn't say the book is bad.
Shocker.
Yes, I'm recognizing that historical narratives, narrative history, what is it called? Whatever the genre is, it is not my forte. Was not particularly a fan of this book. One of the things I didn't like about the book, and one of the things I found confusing about the book, which normally doesn't happen, is it is shifting perspectives constantly between Burnham and Holmes.
I did read a completely, I'm assuming, fictional conversation where somebody was joking that this feels like two different books and that Erik Larson was real excited to write an in-depth study on the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, and he happened to mention that, oh yeah, America's first serial killer was in Chicago at that time, and his editor was like, oh, what if you alternated chapters between the construction of the fair and then whatever Holmes was doing at that point? And Erik Larson was like, no, they're not really connected in any way.
And they're not.
And his editor was just like, but people will love it. So
it does feel that way. It does feel like two separate books between the perspectives. And when I say this, normally shifting perspectives are not necessarily a problem for me. One of my problems with this book is, well, one, I listen to this book. A lot of the books I don't particularly enjoy, I listen to, so I can do something else to entertain my brain while I'm listening to it. But so many of the characters' names sounded so similar, and I found it so hard to keep track of who we were talking about, as cased by me forgetting what's his name's name in the intro. Burnham's name. Daniel Burnham?
Yes, you
David
got it.
Burnham.
It starts with a D.
Yeah,
You're
sure.
good.
Dan Burnham. Dan Burns. Where were we?
The book opens with Daniel Burnham. He's on the sister ship to the Titanic and finds out that, I forget the name of the ship, but the sister ship of the Titanic. Olympia. And he is trying to send a message to his friend that's on the Titanic right before we all know what happens.
Yeah.
And so that's the opening of the book.
Sure.
And then it goes back in his history to how did they decide to do this World's Fair in Chicago? And what was that process like? And
boring. That's what that process was like. It was boring. They talk about how a bunch of people voted. The people in St. Louis voted, and they said no. But then the people in New York said they wanted it there, and then they voted on it, and they all disagreed. So they came back and voted again, and then they agreed. That's the whole process.
Yeah, they really get into a lot of extra detail.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know at one point you were really frustrated because they repeatedly shared the menus of what these guys were eating at different
Yes, and
large meetings.
Listed the full menus, and Christina did let me know that in the print version of the book, it's just like the formatting is like it's a menu.
Yes, and you can skip over it pretty easily.
Or at least skim it, Whereas when it's being narrated to you, and it's just a guy going, duck allonge, croissant. He did say croissant, and it made me very happy.
There was a lot of French vocabulary in those menus, I will not lie.
Yes, there was. And like I said, going back to the names and how much that frustrated me, I'm a person who reads fantasy and sci-fi pretty much exclusively outside of this podcast. And there's a lot of random-ass names in there.
Yes.
Where you just kind of skim the name over and you go, oh, it starts with an A and it's this long, it's this guy. It was so hard to do in this book because every character in this book is just a twat. They're all bad.
Every character comes across as very self-centered, thinks their idea is the best idea or the only way to do something.
And listen, these were white men in the 1890s. Of course they thought that way. I get the historical context. Doesn't mean I like it. Doesn't mean I like reading about it.
Yeah, there were a lot of strong personalities at play, and I did get kind of bored at times having to hear, oh yeah, these guys are arguing again about this building or where they want to put these plants or what kind of boat is going to go in the lagoon.
And then it quickly switches over to a psychopath planning his next murder.
Yes, which is a little jolting.
It can be, which, going back, switching from Burnham to Holmes, I did enjoy some of the Holmes part because, violence, and that's what I lean to in my media. Sorry.
You're like, something's happening.
Yes, somebody dying, but at least it's something.
So you're not impressed when they're like, we had 1,000 men doing this thing.
No.
And 400 ostriches imported. And then this many trainloads of butter. That didn't impress you?
Not even remotely.
Okay.
And this is something that frustrates me because I should like this. I love in a epic fantasy when I have 2 pages about how the currency works in that country. I think the difference is like, I know how this works. Yes, I know this took a people. Yes, I know this took a ton of resources. Stop giving me the numbers already. Give me a few numbers, not all of the numbers.
See, I think part of this is the way Erik Larson went into this project, which from what I was reading a little bit about the way he was looking at it, he was inspired by Truman Capote?
Yes.
However you say that, in Cold Blood, whatever the famous book is, whatever. He was inspired by that. He tried to view, especially the sections on Holmes, he wanted them to be written as if he was a prosecutor. So he tried to drain as much of his own perspective and his own thoughts and feelings out of the narrative. I know he talks in the footnotes in the back how, obviously he did a ton of research. As you can tell, there's like 50 pages of footnotes in the back, which is amazing and beautiful, and I loved that.
No.
But he also talked about how he consulted a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, to kind of psychoanalyze Holmes and what was driving him. Because let's be real, it's America's first serial killer, and the firsthand accounts, they didn't know what they were dealing with.
Sure.
Not really.
This was a time, I'm sure, as we've all saw, a lot of us have heard this joke before, but this was a time when to get away with bank robbery, you just had to not be there when the cops showed up.
This was before DNA. This was before fingerprints. This was before a lot of things.
This was just one of the things they mentioned in this is how the method of identifying someone's height and, proportions would help you identify the killer.
Yeah.
So, this is still very early detective work.
And they lay the groundwork early on. I say they. Erik Larson, the author, he lays the groundwork very early on in the book that Chicago in this time period was a place where people could just disappear. They could also reinvent themselves because, again, this is a period of time where you could just move across the state and show up in a town and be like, my name is this now. And how is anybody going to fact check you?
I wish so bad I could do that. That would be so fun.
Mm-hmm. You can just be a whole different person if you want to. I did think it was really cool. I forgot to mention this earlier, but why did Erik Larson write this book in the first place? So he read, I believe the author is Caleb Carr. It's a book called The Alienist, which is also on my to-read list.
Oh, no.
I'm not making you read this.
Oh, yay.
There's also a supposedly really good TV show based off of it. It's basically the field of psychology.
Sure.
That's what they were called alienists at first. I don't know why.
That's odd.
But it's same time period, 1890s, psychologist dissecting people and solving crimes and stuff.
I mean, which is what they did.
Which is what they did. He and the other piece that drew him to the Chicago's World Fair is because he is an avid chewer of juicy fruit bubblegum, which was invented at the Chicago World's Fair.
Of course it was.
And so those two things are what sparked his interest in like this topic. And then he included H.H. Holmes because he said that he wanted to show this monument of darkness juxtaposed with the monument of civic goodwill.
Sure. Coming at it from that perspective, like after when you first said that to me moments ago.
Yes.
Because also, I just want to say, I think I beat my record on how close to recording an episode have I finished a book.
Mm-hmm.
It was 15 minutes ago, baby. But under that perspective, going from the parallels of these are two sides of Chicago.
Yes.
Where, yes, you have, with Burnham, you have the very industrious, progressing forward, trying to be at the best part of America that we can through industry and wealth and joining together as a city to produce the World's Fair.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have H.H. Holmes, where it was, he could show up, say his name to buy a hotel and use that hotel to murder a bunch of people. And yeah, that like you said, there's two sides of the same coin, which I do appreciate that.
I do think, like you just said, looking at it as perspectives on Chicago, because even in the book, especially towards the latter half, once this white city, the fair, which was called the White City because they invented this version of like spray painting.
And not because they were all white.
The people were not all white. Thank you. The buildings were all white.
So this was a time where people did not have the greatest understanding of the human race. And I will say, Erik Larson does his best during the actual World's Fair portion.
Yes.
To not make it sound super kind of racist.
He does his absolute best.
He does a good job, but there's a few times where it's just like, ooh, this seems not okay.
Times have changed.
He's just reporting on the facts,
Exactly.
No,
he is sharing what happened, and some of it was not cool, guys.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, so the fair itself became known as the White City, and he started calling Chicago the city proper the Black City. And I think it parallels that juxtaposition between Burnham and Holmes as well.
I will say, one of the things I did enjoy was how much Burnham was talking about, like, making landscape architecture a thing, to be honest. Because I agree with it. Landscape architecture is important. All around us should be beautiful.
That's because he hired the guy Olmsted that was the landscape architect who did Central Park in New York City. Right. Burnham approached Olmsted, but then Olmsted was the one, like, driving that piece forward.
There was a lot. Thinking back to the juicy fruit thing you mentioned, there is a lot in this book that is a historical name drop kind of situation where, like, there's a point where he's like somewhere in the book during the building of the World's Fair, he mentions that Elias Disney was there along with his son Walt. And then later in the epilogue, he's like, and maybe the World's Fair influenced Walt Disney. And reading it felt very much like the end of Iron Man when Samuel L. Jackson comes out and is like, I'm here to talk about the Avengers Initiative. And I, as a history nerd or as a comics nerd, was like, oh my God, this is awesome. and everybody else was like, what is going on?
Yes, it's like the heyday of Marvel when you'd stay for those after credit scenes and they'd show a shadow on a wall and everybody would freak out and lose their minds.
Which I'm sure was very entertaining to someone like you who knows any amount of history whatsoever.
It's so true, because I felt like as much as I enjoyed the historical detail in this book, it did bog me down sometimes.
Sure.
I'm like, okay, how many times do I have to hear, oh, they're having another meeting and they're arguing about architecture?
Oh my gosh, so many meetings and so many arguments.
It rained and it's real muddy and it's making the conditions difficult to do construction in, which is fair. I do want to know that, but there was a lot of...
That would I felt would have been more interesting if it didn't take so dang long to get to the World's Fair. Like, even the building of the World's Fair, it takes forever to get there.
It is a solid, at least half the book is just building the World Fair, if not 3/4 of the book. It's a long time before the World's Fair opens. But yes, all the historical little details, I was in heaven. Every time they would mention those, I would just have a little squeal in my head of, ooh, I know exactly. Ooh, that's that person. Ooh. It's like my mental, I want to say map, but it's more of a web of history. It would just be, I have the pins in here, and he'd mention, Disney, or, oh, we got to build something that is rivaling the Eiffel Tower. What is it going to be? What's it going to be? Oh, this guy Ferris came up with something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be the Ferris wheel. Do I care about Ferris wheels? No. They're kind of boring and overrated. But it was really cool to know where it originated and why they built it in the first place.
It was cool to see how many people died and tried to kill themselves on the first Ferris wheel.
They ended up like putting glass and iron bars over the windows so people wouldn't commit suicide.
Yep.
Which tells you a lot.
There was one of the cars that flipped over and killed a lady. It only killed one, though.
It's true.
Which is wild. I think it only fell like 15 feet, but...
True.
But it is a ton carriage that is... whatever.
Yes, I was very much in awe of just the grand scale of some of the things. When they would talk about how big some of the buildings were, or how tall, or just again, oh, we have 1,000 janitors. What? 1,000? 1,000 people. Like, I'm trying to picture it in my head and go, and that's just the people that are there to clean up trash and whatnot. What? How do you have the kind of money?
He got a loan from the bank.
Well, he did, and it's a whole thing, but...
There's a whole thing where the bank threatens to, like, come in and cut things, and then they never do.
Well, that was because there was a whole bunch of runs on banks, and banks were failing, and all these bankers were committing suicide, and it was a bad time economically for a moment for the U.S. I'm not going to lie, I kind of skimmed over that, because I was like, cool, I don't care.
Yeah, I do remember it does feel very skimmed over. It did seem like a point that he just made to... make the point that the banks were breathing down Burnham's neck.
Which is fair. It's like, it's the point where the fair is open and like, we have to have at least 100,000 people visit every single day in order to make money on this. Otherwise, we will be in the red.
Feel free to cut this out.
Mm-hmm.
This entire book kind of reminds me of when I ask you a question, like a simple yes or no question. Like, so did Holmes actually kill anybody? And you would go, well, so there was this guy named Burnham who wanted to build the World's Fair. And this is what, to me, that book felt like.
Did I give all the background information?
Yes, all the context and none of the answers.
You go, where are you going? And I'm like, okay, so remember so-and-so? So they invited me to go do this? Yes, I know.
Which is fine. It's fine.
The answer is buried in there.
Yes.
It's just bookended by a lot of information that's not technically required.
And listen, I have ADHD, okay? So, like, she starts with the context, and then I have to keep paying attention. Like, I have to pay attention at a very specific point to get the answer. And you might be thinking, hey, you should always pay attention. Absolutely not.
To be fair, yes. But I don't talk as long as this guy did.
That's true. I can't say that the prose is bad. I don't think Erik Larson is a bad writer per se.
No, he made me giggle multiple times.
Yeah, he does. Like, yeah, the format, like, yeah, the prose is good.
Yes.
The narrative is not.
I think that's an excellent distinction because I was struggling about halfway through this book to explain how I felt about it because, like I said, I was having those moments of historical glee of, oh, this dot connects to this dot.
Right.
That got me very excited. Or I would have little moments where I was enjoying his writing and it would make me giggle. Like, one thing that comes to mind is he introduced, I forget who it was one of the architects, and he just described him as a frown in a suit.
Yeah, I do remember that.
And so there's little things like that sprinkled in that just made me giggle.
Sure.
But then I kept being bored.
Unfortunately.
Or feeling like it was dragging, and I'm like, yeah, I know all of this happened, or, oh, they face yet another roadblock, yet another impossible thing to overcome.
Which I think if there had been more focus on the conflicts that were happening, like, yes, okay, you have these builders coming in from New York who now have to build in Chicago soil.
Which is way different.
Completely different. And, like, yeah, okay, talk me through that. Tell me how, what they did, how they overcame that conflict. But every time they come up against a conflict, it's just kind of like, they fixed it.
Do you think it's partially because this is a very big picture zoomed out look? And if it had
absolutely
zoomed in and actually went through, for instance, oh, you've got these guys who've never built with Chicago soil, which is weirdly full of water and sand and thus very unstable. Walk us through, okay, you tried this and it didn't work. You tried this and it didn't work. You tried this, and showing that process in more detail. I guess I want to read this as a novel.
I was coming at it like a novel, for sure. Again, I think Erik Larson is a good writer. This whole book, I think it didn't have one of the biggest sins I think a lot of books have, where they just kind of put stuff in there. There is not, to me, it felt like everything in this book was intentional.
Yes.
Erik Larson specifically wanted this in this book. But why is it so boring?
I think that's exactly it, is that both of us are wanting more of a novel.
Absolutely.
Where we get to know the characters more personally and get to see and feel their struggle more.
Because, to be honest, I think my favorite parts of the book were when, like, it was Holmes' upbringing and kind of how that turned him into the killer, basically. Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of that is speculation because we don't know a lot of stuff.
For sure.
Or it's based on his autobiography, which, I mean, meh.
Yeah.
If somebody's a pathological liar, do you trust their autobiography?
Right.
But I think Erik Larson approached this from a perspective where he wasn't going to put his own thoughts or project emotions onto people.
Sure.
Which is where you've got all those footnotes in the back where he has all these direct quotes from, like, letters and things that people wrote.
Cool.
There's which I recognize when you're listening to it,
for sure.
You're not picking up on the fact that that's in quotes.
Yeah.
But I think that is part of the disconnect of feeling so distanced of, I don't feel the emotional impact of, oh, this fire that could have burned things, whatever. I'm not feeling that as much.
Yeah.
Because I'm disconnected from these people. They're just little cardboard cutouts.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know what you said that made me think of this, but concerning back to the audiobook, I do think the narrator, while I wasn't a huge fan of him, he did, every time he was, like, describing one of the horrific accidents that happened, he just did have this great vibe of ominous doom the whole time.
That's perfect.
And it was, that was very enjoyable.
Oh, I would also, just as an aside, we didn't mention this at all, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show was next door to the Chicago World's Fair.
I thought it was in the World's Fair. Oh.
No, he wanted to be part of it, and they said no for some reason, and so Buffalo Bill Cody was just like, okay, fine, and he bought 15 acres next door to it, to the point that the entrance to his Wild West show was right next to the entrance to one of the World's Fairs, and at some point in one of the many details of numbers and whatnot, they calculated the amount of money that the World's Fair lost because of all the people who mistakenly went to Buffalo Bill Cody's thing and thinking they were going into the World's Fair, and they messed up and they went into one, and they were like, if they'd just let him be part of it, they would have made so much. It was like $1 million+ in today's money that gave up that went to his show instead of the World's Fair.
No, didn't they say he made $1 million off of the show?
Mm-hmm.
There, and then use that to fund to found Cody, Wyoming.
Yes,
I love that. God,
yes.
I love it.
It's pretty wonderful.
That makes me so happy.
But it did just make me laugh because his show opened like months before the actual fair opened,
yes.
And so that's where they're like, if they'd just connected him to the fair the way that he wanted, they would have been making revenue for like 3 extra months.
I love the spite. The spite is so good.
Uh-huh.
That makes me so happy.
Exactly. It's those moments that made the book worth reading in my mind.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you have any more thoughts?
I'm not going to lie. This book was disappointing
Sure.
to me. And I think part of that is because, this author is world-renowned. This book in particular was on the best-selling lists for like 300 some weeks when it was published. It's been wildly popular.
Yeah.
The fact that I Google narrative nonfiction and it still shows up in the top 10 today, 20 something years after it was published, that tells you that it is well thought of. And it's also been on my list forever, so I think I built it up in my mind of what I thought it was going to be, and then it was not.
Absolutely. I know I've said this. I like, again, Erik Larson is a good writer.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted more of a narrative.
Oh, also, random aside, I learned something in this book that was kind of disappointing.
I learned a lot of things and promptly forgot them.
Okay. H.H. Holmes is probably not buried in Philadelphia. So when I was in Philadelphia a couple years ago and we tracked down the grave of H.H. Holmes, which is unmarked and is just like this random little tomb.
Sure.
Whatever. And we had to find it in this big graveyard based on photos of like, okay, there's a cross over this direction. There's this, whatever. We found it just to say we had seen it. But then reading the book, Erik Larson said it's not marked. And so now I'm like, whose grave did I visit in Philadelphia?
Whose grave did I piss on in Philly? Right?
No. I just gave him a thumbs down.
Okay, that's fair.
Thumbs down. Bad. Don't approve.
And yeah, sorry we didn't go into a lot of the plot this episode. There's not one. That's not true. There is a plot. There is some of a plot.
There is the building of the fair. Well, there's the groundwork for the fair, the building of the fair, the actual fair itself.
Don't forget about the voting about the fair.
That's in the planning.
Oh,
and then the aftermath of the fair.
Yeah.
And then interspersed is Holmes on his crime spree in Chicago. And then afterwards, how he was caught.
Holmes just kind of does his thing throughout this. The two characters are not connected to each other in any way whatsoever.
Nope.
Not even remotely.
It's just like, hey, here's what's going on in the World's Fair. Pans over in another part of Chicago. Meanwhile.
I imagined it in my head. I imagined that his hotel was directly next to the World's Fair.
It's not.
I know, but in my head, it is. It's like just right there.
Fair enough. So yes, any concluding thoughts on this book?
Sure. So we are kind of changing up the format.
Mm-hmm.
We are no longer doing stars just because if I'm going to rail on books, I don't need to put a critique rating on it. If you want to see my actual go to our Goodreads.
Woo!
But what we do want to do is start saying why you should and why you should not read this book.
Yes.
So you should read this book if you like true crime. That side of the book with H.H. Holmes was decent. Not my favorite genre, but I think it's a decent true crime.
It was cool from that perspective.
Yeah.
Also, if you are a history nerd or an engineer or architect, you will probably get a kick out of this because they go into a lot of detail.
So much detail. I didn't need it. I didn't need all the detail.
It was fun.
You would also enjoy this book if you want to know more about the Gilded Age of America.
Which
right?
is, yes.
Is that?
Which the peak of that is the 1870s to the 1890s. So this is smack in there.
Yeah, and there is a lot of history in there. I did learn some reading this book.
Mm-hmm.
Again, will I remember it? No. Mm-mm.
But it is really cool as a little snapshot of a time period in American history that I know relatively little about.
Mm-hmm. And then you shouldn't read this book.
If you want an actual narrative.
There is none. I'm sorry.
Like we said, I think if you're expecting more of a novel, when you hear the words narrative nonfiction, yeah, this is not that.
You should not read this book if you don't want to slog through a bunch of dates and numbers.
And other details. Very true.
It's one of the biggest struggles in this book. I don't know why I struggle with nonfiction so much. Just give me dragons, man. Let me have dragons and I'll be okay. Give me the World's Fair with dragons and I would be so in.
I will admit I did hit a point of frustration when they kept saying, and on this day, this many people attended the fair and it made this much money. And then it would fast forward and be like a couple months later. And on this day, this many people attended and made this much money. And I was just, oh, okay, man. But last but not least, you should not read this book if murder makes you queasy, because they don't go into a ton of detail for most of Holmes' murders. There's a lot of mysterious disappearances, and this lady just decided to move to California and she liked it, and so she's never coming back, and you kind of fill in the blanks. But they do detail a few of them. Especially towards the end of the book, there are a few murders involving children, and they do talk about the autopsy a little bit. Also, at the beginning of the book, this was like the year after Jack the Ripper went on his little spree, so they also talk about that, and that was kind of gross and graphic.
Yes.
I had actually never had heard exactly what Jack the Ripper did to the women he killed, and didn't really enjoy reading that in detail.
I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but I wasn't vastly again. I read things like Warhammer and watch extremely violent movies. Your
tolerance is much higher.
That's not necessarily a good thing.
I don't want to hear how a woman was dissected.
No, I do agree with that. And so, the kids, that was...
So trigger warning. If that sort of thing makes you queasy, maybe steer clear of this.
Okay, recommendations. What we've been doing.
Great transition.
Yeah.
Other things that we enjoyed in the past month or are continuing to enjoy.
So I recently played a game called Vigil. It is on the PC on Steam. It is free. What it is it is a horror game with eye tracking software that basically tracks you blinking. And the main enemy of this game is it moves when you aren't looking at it, kind of Weeping Angel style from Doctor Who. You know what we're talking about. You've seen this before. And you are playing this character who is kind of wandering around this facility with a mysterious past. Very well done. It's about 30 minutes to beat. It's not a long game, but it is, it was very cool to play and very interesting.
Cool. And it's free on Steam, apparently.
Yes, it is.
When you were describing this game to me a few days ago, I didn't know that video games had that capability to do the eye tracking thing.
Yeah, it just uses your webcam. As long as you have a webcam. If you don't have a webcam, it does have the ability to use a button input instead for the blink. But it's a lot better with the webcam. It's very fun.
That's really neat. The thing I would like to recommend to everybody, provided I haven't mentioned this before, I might have, but...
Also, to repeat, that was Vigil, is the name, Vigil. Sorry.
No, you're good. I would like to recommend the TV show Mad Men. If you like historical fiction...
If you like them angry boys...
If you like historical fiction that is a little bit more on the soapy end of things... Mad Men is an award-winning TV show for a reason. I know it came out in, I believe, the early and into the mid-2000s, because, it's 7-8 seasons long.
Sure.
I'm in season 3 currently. but it's really cool. If you don't know what it's about, it's set in the 1960s and follows a guy called Don Draper who works in an advertising agency creating ads and marketing for various companies, and his family life, his womanizing ways,
Naturally.
and so on and so forth. Obviously, you've got all the cool characters, and watching them interplay with each other, I think they have a really great cast. But I really enjoy the peek into a time period in history. There is, again, a lot of that historical name dropping. For instance, in a recent episode, we heard MLK's I Have a Dream speech in the background, or Kennedy was shot, or we landed on the moon. So there's all those little historical pieces, plus you get to dig into a lot of civil rights, gender politics, all kinds of cool stuff.
Heck yeah.
So, Mad Men.
Yeah, what are we reading next month?
Next month, we are reading a paranormal romance for February.
Ooh.
It is called The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon. So we've got Hart, who is a marshal patrolling a strange and magical world, and Mercy, who is running an undertaker business. They become correspondents via mail without realizing that they are talking to each other, and so it's a classic enemies to lovers. The description on the front that I really liked is somebody's review said it is a uniquely charming mixture of whimsy and the macabre.
I'm here for it.
It sounds delightful.
Maybe I'll like a romance book.
Woo! We'll find out. Join us in February for The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy.
Bye-bye.
See ya.